Suzy, it's so good to be with you. I can't believe you're on your sixth book tour.
Mm.
Are you an introvert or an extrovert?
Yeah, I'm so far off the scale on extroversion that you can't even measure it, to tell you the truth. I mean, it's just, I've only met one person more extroverted than me, and that was my husband, my late husband, Jack. We are, it's not that I don't have an appreciation for introversion. I had four children who are introverts, all four of them. So I totally get it, but it's just in you. So yeah, I'm extroverted.
What was it like being in a two extrovert marriage?
It was good because we always had the same vibe on everything. Like, we would go to a party and we'd say, oh, good. So many people we don't know. We're just about to meet new people. This is going to be so much fun. And then we would say to each other, should we leave the party? And then we say, no, there's still like three people we haven't met. And then we would make sure we met everybody. So I know it's not, it's definitely not normal, but it's not like we, asked to be extroverts. It kind of comes with the wiring, and we dug it. It was
That's
good.
really funny. And
Yeah.
you have four introverted children.
Yeah, they're all introverted. All four of them. Yeah, for sure.
Did they ever look at you guys and be like, you guys are aliens?
We had a healthy appreciation for each other's differences. I mean, sometimes, of course, like all parents, we wanted one of the things you learn as a parent is that one day it dawns on you, oh, they're not going to be me.
Yep.
And they're really different from me. And so we had our own journey to saying, oh gosh, no matter what we say, this kid is not going to want to go to a party where they don't know anybody. And so, we did. But there was so much love in our family, and still is. Although we are missing our member, we got used to each other and we appreciated each other because we didn't
Yeah.
try. Nobody tried to change anybody.
Well, I think that's the key, right?
Right.
Yes. It's funny. I'm very introverted. My husband is quite extroverted, and it's been a journey because I think sometimes he feels lonely,
Yeah.
and is like, why don't you go do stuff with me? Why won't you be this person with me? And I'm like, just want to be in my garden with my pets and
I
my
know it.
kids.
I mean, this is why it was very copacetic that, like, when we went out to restaurants, people would always think, oh, it's Jack had sort of this reputation around him, and oh, he's going to want a fine table, and he would be like, no, I want to sit at the bar because then I get to talk to people I don't know. And but I can imagine it would be complicated if one person wants to do that and the other person wants to be sitting at a table. Yeah.
Yeah. When you work with more introverted students,
Yes.
do you have any advice that you give them?
I do. I do, because so many of my students, my class, Becoming You, is about understanding who you are, standing still, understanding all of your cognitive aptitudes, of which introversion or extroversion is one of them. And we also study whether or not they're specialists or generalists or, brainstormers or idea contributors. And so we are looking, directly into what your aptitudes are. And so I often get students who are introverted and they say, what do I do about it? And my advice, I'm no expert in it. There are people who are experts in this. But my advice to them is tell people you're an introvert. Don't let them figure it out the hard way. Say, hey, new team at new company, I'm an introvert by nature. And that means that I sometimes hear conversations, I go away, I process them, and then I come back with my comments. And I'm totally engaged. I'm really actively listening. But my introversion has me process that information in a slightly different way than you. So bear with me. And I feel like introverts have to educate the extroverts around them about what stuff feels like to them, because they can be spectacular and magnificent contributors to every team, as long as they're understood. Because sometimes introverts are read as, I think there's two types of people in the world. Generally, there's there's energy amplifiers, people who add positive energy to every room they're in. And then there's energy vampires who suck the energy right out. And very unfortunately, introverts can be mislabeled as energy vampires, or can be, let me say this, experienced as energy vampires, because they are quiet and they then appear withholding. Okay, now what's going on is their brain is processing at a different speed and a different way, and sometimes with a lot more depth and subtlety and so forth, because we extroverts can be like steamrollers and can be
Introverts'
impulsive.
brains literally, it's literally harder for us to access our dopamine, and so we are literally kind of a tougher laugh.
Yeah, that's
Although,
right. And
yeah.
so, but it doesn't mean you're not experiencing emotions, and you may totally sort of soak in those emotions later. And some of my like biggest, deepest feelers as the students are the introverts, but in class, the extroverts are, filling the room with their laughter or their crying or whatever is going on because becoming is a super emotional experience. So I advise introverts to self-identify and to explain themselves to the world because they need cover. They
Yeah.
need cover for the world to give them the breaks they deserve.
Do you know the concept of acting out of character?
No, I mean, I can intuit what it means, but tell me what you're
It's
talking
very
about.
intuitive. So this
Okay.
Brian Little at Harvard, and I think it's a really powerful thing for introverts because a lot of us introverts are. I mean, I'm an introvert and I am the biggest ham. Like, put me on stage and in front of 1,000 people, and I am so happy because I am very passionate about what I do, and I've learned to act out of character. And
Oh, I see.
so
So
that's
that's
why
an act.
Oprah.
That's an act when you're doing that.
It's I prefer to call it a skill
Okay.
because, and it's the reason why a lot of the most famous comedians, and Oprah is a huge introvert. It's not that we're incapable of dazzling. It's that it takes a different motivation for us,
Mm.
and it's a more focused effort. So for us, we'd probably rather die than go to a party and meet new strangers. But because we have something to say that we really care about and a big passion and we get excited, we can stand up in front of a room and teach and act like the funniest, most charismatic person in the world for 2 hours.
Because of your motivation.
Just afterwards, we might have to rest.
That's right.
For, for me, this concept was so transformative. So I
Yeah.
just, if for your students and anyone out there, because it was always like, well, why is it so easy for me to be in front of a room and so hard for me at a cocktail party
Right, because
afterward?
the motivation is totally different,
What's
right?
wrong? Like,
Yeah.
why can I not go out to a live music show when my husband would literally just, it would make him so happy if I just went out to
Yeah.
a live music
Oh,
show. Anyway, it's
all right.
complicated.
Yeah.
So you've talked a little bit about your own history with anxiety. You've had guests on your podcast. You've said I think you said 90 to 95% of your students
We'll
will
say they have anxiety, okay?
tell me the difference.
Oh, I mean, look, well, you know better than I do that true anxiety as a clinical condition is a very serious thing, and it can be devastating. It can change your life. It often requires medication. Um, And so I don't know how many of my students actually have clinical anxiety, diagnosable clinical anxiety, but I think that 90% will use the word in passing the same way in the olden days, we used to say things like, I'm really nervous. Okay.
Mm-hmm,
They'll say, I
mm-hmm.
have anxiety over whether I should live with my boyfriend, or I have anxiety about the job search. And so whether or not they have true anxiety or if it's just normal adulting, I don't know. Okay. Uh,
Or
it's
if anxiety is normal in adult, I would say
Right.
like anxiety
Yeah,
is
it is.
normal
Like,
in
so I,
adulting.
I often say to them, please don't cancel me. But what's happening to you is you're having to act like an adult. I'm sorry that feels like anxiety, and I mean, I have a student who has a complicated tax situation because she's a dual citizen. And she was talking about how her tax situation was giving her anxiety. And I was like, let's not throw that word around. Okay.
Mm.
You have a very complicated tax situation. It is definitely causing you some discomfort and, just it's complicated. It's going to pass. It's directly related to your taxes, and it's adulthood, by the way. And so, but real anxiety, which is crippling for some people, and is really serious, and is life changing, and not always for the better, and has to be managed like any other illness, any other chronic illness. I don't know what percentage actually have that. I don't.
Yeah. But they're saying they feel anxious.
Yes. Yes. I don't know if it's semantics because I feel anxious. I run a business and I have hundreds of students, and I'm on a book tour, and I feel anxious 90% of the day, but I don't, I don't say it. I think it's generational in a way. I mean,
Mm.
and also I'm just older. I tend to say things like, uh, you know, I like kind of identify the problem and say, I have a student who has not done two of the quizzes, and I probably should flunk her, but I know she has personal problems and I don't know what to do about this problem. I don't then add the phrase, this is making me anxious. Although maybe it is. I mean, okay, by rights, it makes me anxious, but I understand it's part of my life and part of my job, and I got to work through it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think anxiety is part of life.
Yeah, it is. But so's joy. Uh, so are a lot of emotions.
Absolutely.
And I
Yeah.
think that at the minute it's a framing thing. I mean, a lot of what I do for my students who come in and present with anxieties, reframe for them a way to think and talk about it that understands that sometimes anxiety can be very productive energy to make its kick in your rear end to get stuff done, to make a
Yeah.
decision usually.
Absolutely. Right. Like, welcome anxiety. It's great that I feel anxiety because I really care.
Yeah, I care, and it's like your conscience. People hate feeling certain emotions, and I say, sometimes people talk to me a lot about guilt because I am in the business of helping people find their purpose in their right career, and they'll say, well, I really want to do X, Y, and Z, but then I'll feel so guilty about my kids, and
Yeah.
I have to talk to them about guilt as a choice. Is guilt a voice saying you are not living your values, or is guilt a voice saying you're not fulfilling people's expectations of you that you don't actually agree with?
Right. Oh, I want to get into expectations, but I want to start with values. Um, today I want to focus on values, and then I want to focus on strengths. I know that they're both pieces of your becoming you process. And you said something on one of your podcasts that shocked me. You said that only, I think it was 7% of people have actually identified their values.
Yeah, for
That
sure.
that felt shocking to me.
Oh my gosh, it's just commonplace. I mean, if you ask people their values, of course, I've done all this work. You'd ask people their values and they'll just name two virtues. They don't even know what a value is.
How is a virtue different than a value?
Well, a virtue is well, let me tell you what values are. Values
Yeah.
are deeply held beliefs and motivations that drive your actions and decisions. They are their choices. You can value achievement, or you can value. They're all continuums. There's 15 human values. 15. Usually, if you ask people their values, they'll name virtues, or then if they do name a value, they'll name the two big common values, which are family and money. But there are lots of values about how, like scope, how big or small we want our life, belonging, which is how much community matters to us. There's agency, how much self-determination matters to us. Virtues are fairness, integrity, kindness. And these are things we all want to be. There's no choice on them. They're tickets to the game. They're just generally agreed upon historically that there are certain human traits that make living together easier, better, and more sustainable. And nobody's going to sit there and argue with you that integrity or kindness is whether or not they're right or wrong. All virtues are right by definition.
Mm.
Whereas let's talk about an actual value like family centrism. If you have no children and you're not hurting anybody, why should family be I have students say, look, family is not a value to me. My career is my number one value. Travel is a value. That's a value we call scope. And I have other values like affluence or being famous. And family is not a top value for me. It doesn't make them a better or worse person. They just have a different set of values. Whereas if a student came to me and said, I just don't want to be kind, I would say, well, this is just a totally different conversation. And that's not my pay grade. So values, as I said, there's three big values inventories in basically in the psychological literature that have identified values. There's this Alport-Strang values inventory, which was developed in the 1940s at Harvard. There's the Schwartz values inventory that was developed at Hebrew University in the 90s. And then there's my values inventory that was developed at University of Bristol in England. And it has 15 values. And okay, you can argue, and academics will, about whether it's 11, 19, or 15. But the facts are there's many more values than we look at and think about and talk about, but we should. So when I say people don't know their values, they usually are naming virtues. And, once they do the work, for instance, once they take the Values Bridge test, which you can take for free, once they take that, they go, oh yeah, those are my values. Why did I never know that before? Like, why did I not have words for this before? And it's like, well, because you can go to high school and you can find out how to calculate the volume of a cylinder, and you can go to college and you can learn the history of Bavaria, but nowhere along the way is there a class on what your values are, which is probably the most important thing you can learn about yourself before you go out in the world.
And what's really interesting that you're saying is that, well, you might say, well, it's my parents' job or it's church's job or it's synagogue, but those are virtues, not values that we tend to learn the golden rule.
Right. I mean, well, I was, if you grew up in my household, values were your parents' job, because my kids all were brought up with this, and it was unusual. And they often said, I talk about values with my friends. They have no idea what I'm talking about. But yeah, and also as parents, we teach our kids virtues. But the problem with values is that parents often disagree with their children about values. I mean, for me, a
Yes.
very high value is work centrism, which is work is an organizing principle of your life. I've always wanted to work. I love working on my days, my technical days off. I work. I love work. It's a value of mine. I'm not a workaholic. I'm a person with a high value of work centrism. And my children, being sort of more, they're in their 30s, more generationally aligned, have a lower value of work centrism. So one of the reasons we don't talk about values in our households generally is that they can be contentious, until we all have a shared language. And I know from doing values work and the number of people who use my values inventory and my values language, is it actually ultimately really decreases tension and decreases uh, animosity and hostility, because you have a shared language to talk about what matters without judgment.
You have a value. I'm going to blank on the name of it, which a value on appearance and how
Beholderism. Beholderism.
beholderism.
Right. So this is one of the oldest values. Every values inventory has a version of this. The Alport Strang values inventory calls this aesthetics, but really it's the value of how much it matters to you how stuff looks, including yourself. And you know that there are people whose homes are perfect, their hair is perfect, their outfits are perfect, and they spend a huge amount of time and money on it. Guess why? It's a value. And then there's other people who walk around with a big knot in the back of their hair and their houses are dumps and they don't give a damn. It's a value. Beholderism. I sometimes say there should be a support group for people who find out they have high beholderism, because the first thing they do is say, oh, I'm not like that. I'm not superficial. But
Right on, so superficial,
it's
right?
not, though, because it's a proxy. Like all values, it's a proxy for something. It's a proxy. In my case, I think it's a proxy for harmony. I can't
Mhm.
control a lot of things in this world, but I can control how my home looks, and I can keep my home orderly, and I can control how I look, but I can't control it. So I mean, I don't care why people have their values, where they come from. There's a whole field of values formation. Power to those people. That's not my area of expertise. My PhD is in values expression, which is what values we have and how much we're living them and whether we're living them. Because a lot of times we have values and we don't live them at all. And so I think if you're not hurting anybody, and that's a big if, but if you're not hurting anybody with your values, you have every right to live your values. Just live them. There's no right or wrong with values. Whether you have high or low value of self-determination is up to you. That we call that value agency, how much you have to be the driver of your bus. I've had students say to me, I don't care what industry I'm in, what job I've got, as long as I'm the boss and I'm making the rules. That's very high agency. And then there's other people who are super collaborative, and they love consensus, and they don't have to be in charge of everything, and they have low agency. They don't want to drive every bus. I'm actually a person who, people are always surprised because I have an intense personality. I actually am very moderate to low on agency. And
Hmm.
and sometimes I have to say, gee, I wish that wasn't so much of a value of mine, because I end up doing some things I'm not crazy about, but it is a value, is consensus for me. So I think that the important thing is to know what your values are, to put names to all of them. I think, dare I say, if I asked you to list your values, you would probably just give me a bunch of virtues. So
Hmm.
when I say that, I mean, even people who are in this field, who talk
Yeah.
and think about human behavior and psychology, don't have a very tight grip on values.
It
But they do instantly. I mean, literally, I've been at dinner parties, described 15 values, and by the end of the dinner party, 15 minutes later, everybody's speaking the values language. This is not hard stuff. Everyone recognizes the values, and everyone can almost immediately identify where they are on each continuum. But I will say, when I created the test, I finally did it with behavioral questions, because a lot of people start moving values around because they don't want to upset people in the room. Okay. Or they don't want to like, oh, wait, I don't want people to know my family centrism is 14 out of 15. I'm going to move that up to 7. And so we created the test
Well,
to save you from yourself.
yes. And I should say that your tests are available for folks.
Absolutely, for everybody. I mean, literally thousands of people have used them and taken them. The Values Bridge, you can go online to my website, or you can just type in the Values Bridge, Suzy Welch, it will pop right up. And I want to be candid, there's 2 versions. There's a free version, which will tell you some information, and it's pretty good. And there's a souped up version, which you can pay for, which tells you everything, all 15 values and all their conflicts and harmonies if they exist. So, but you can get a free look at your top 5 values for sure.
I think it's so important. The population that I work with, a lot of people are neurodivergent. A lot of people have very different brains, mental illness. And one of the things that, and you've alluded to it, is that there's a lot of shame involved, right? In how we think we should be, in our
Yes,
expectations. The
absolutely.
family centrism one is really interesting, and
Mm-hmm.
the work centrism one, as working moms, right?
Right. And then
It,
there's
it,
achievement. That's another one. And another
oof.
value that causes a huge amount of judgment is the value of weak. It's so judgy that I actually had to give it a Greek name, and I call it eudaimonia. It's the value of self-care, which is very high for a lot of people. And then they make a lot of excuses for why it's so high. And their parents say, why do you care so much about self-care? I never thought about that. But it's a value of how much you want leisure and pleasure and tenderness towards yourself. I mean, many of my 20 something students and participants in my workshop have eudaimonia as their top value. And so values do cause us to judge each other and to judge ourselves.
To judge ourselves, right? And I think what's so powerful and what's got my wheels turning, I'm very excited about this, is you know when you feel different
Yeah.
already and you feel like you don't fit and you don't know what your values are, it sets you up for so much conflict and shame.
It's so true. And
And
I mean, I have many students who are neurodivergent. And this is very, I got a beautiful letter from one of them just recently who said, I finally can explain to the world who I am. I now have words to say, to explain who I am, another set of words to explain who I am beyond neurodivergent, to say, look, I have this value. You have you have this level of it, and I have that level of it. And it doesn't make any difference where it came from, whether it comes from my neurodivergence or whatever, but this is a value, and we have every right to have whatever level of it we want. And let us just agree, this is not you good, me bad. All right. This is about a value that exists, that we have every right to have whatever level of it we want. That's why it's different than a virtue, because no one's going to sit around deciding whether or not kindness, you should have a little or a lot. Everyone should have a lot. That's generally accepted cultural and civilizational, civilization imperative. But values are choices. Values are what we what we've decided, how we've decided we want to live our lives. Now, we don't always get to live our values because there's another little thing, which is, you already alluded to it, which is strengths, which I call aptitudes, which is what we're good at. Okay, so we may have a value, say, of extremely high achievement, seen success, and luminance, which is fame, okay, by another name. And you may have those as very high values. I want to be rich and famous, okay? But you may not have any talents or gifts that would make you so. And that's why my methodology says you've got 3 data pools you've got to mine. One is your values, one is your aptitudes, and the other is your economically viable interests. And so we have to look at what's at the overlap of that. So it's really good to have a language to say, these are my motivations, these are my wants. But when we go out into the world to find out the implication of all of that stuff, sometimes we can't get what we want because we don't have
mm,
the aptitudes. We can't be rich or famous because we don't currently have the skills that the world rewards with fame and money. And we may be perfectly good at something else. Okay. We're not going to be a rock star, but we could be a fantastic nurse. Okay. It's just, you got to live in reality.
so what do you do though? I mean, it's a little heartbreaking if your value is to be rich and famous. That's perhaps how you're wired, and yet are you always going to feel disappointed in yourself?
I hope not. I mean, you got to live in the world the way it is, not the way you want it to be. You
Yeah.
don't want to be heartbroken your whole life. Most people eventually develop a healthy sense of realism about it, and they are self-aware, and they say, I always wanted to be on Broadway. The problem was I couldn't dance. And, and so I now enjoy Broadway and I make sure I go once a week. And
Yeah.
it's my happy place. And so most people come to terms with it. I mean, part of growing up and becoming self-actualized is this journey to self-awareness. I mean, it's this moment where becoming you is a journey to self-awareness where you say, okay, I'm going to strip it back. I'm going to find out what my real values are. I'm going to find out how much because we measure the gap between how much you have and how much you're living it. I'm living, I wish I was living all of them, but these are my values. Here are my aptitudes. Is there an overlap with that and my interests? And for a lot of people, becoming you the process itself is very exhilarating because they think, oh my God, I always sensed that was my purpose. And now I know it actually is because it's at the overlap of my values, my aptitudes, and my interests. And other people have what you described as heartbreak. They have a moment of realization that what they secretly want is not achievable. And then they figure out what is.
Right.
What
And
is
that's resiliency.
that? It's resilience. It's humanity. It's like, yeah, I'm not gonna, they come to terms with it. That's humanity. That's, I'm not going to be Tony winning, a Broadway director, but I'm going to enjoy Broadway as I can. And I'm going to continue doing this job over here that is an absolute match for my values and my aptitudes. I mean, maybe it's a perfect match for your aptitudes and a somewhat match for your, but you can cobble together, and not cobble together is probably the wrong term, but you can craft a life that fulfills your values and your aptitudes and your interests, but you have to know what they are. You have to kind of come clean with yourself about what they are. And once you do that, you can start living it.
Can I ask you a question? I mean, one of the things that I'm really fascinated in, especially with the kinds of tricky brains that I love so much, is motivation. Are our values what motivate us?
Yes. Yes. Yep. I mean, absolutely. They are our deeply held beliefs, motivations, desires, and wants. Okay. So let's just take the value. Let's just choose belonging, which is a value that measures how much you want to be part of community, how much you want to be part of groups. Like if you join a company and you immediately want to get onto the softball team, that is the high value of belonging. I mean, I have members of my team who go to 16 weddings a year, and all I know is they must have very high belonging to have that many friends. Okay. And they love going to the weddings, and they don't mind when they're destination weddings. That's a high belonging, so there's other people who just like their own company very much. And if they're the lowest form of hell, the darkest circle of it would be to belong to a fraternity or a sorority, okay, which by definition are representatives of a high value of belonging. All right, and so when you know these, so then these are motivations in that whatever job you want, you're motivated to get it. It is in part driven by how much you value belonging. So yeah, it boils down to motivations. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's really interesting, right? I mean, coming back to introvert, extrovert, a lot of aspects of our personality, I think also, our personality determines what motivates us. Our mental map determines what motivates us. A lot of the data with people who are neurodivergent show that, we're motivated by different things. And so it's really hard if you're in a company where the value is belonging, say,
Right,
and people
absolutely.
are expected to go a certain way.
That's
And
right.
you're like, F this. Agency
That's
is
right.
my top value. I'm not being told what
That's
to
right.
do.
That's right. And I mean, I think I say to my students all the time, because they're using Becoming You to find the right job for them, is just understand every company has values, just like you have values. Every company is somewhere on the spectrum of all of these values. So companies have either higher or lower belonging. They have higher or lower beholderism. I mean, look, I was at Google the other day giving a speech. Those offices show a very high value of beholderism. They're gorgeous. You want to just camp out there. And I said to the person I was with, who was a big values person also, I said, my beholderism is on steroids in here. Like I want to work at Google because I need to be in these offices. I mean, companies have values too. And it's like wearing a suit that's the wrong size to have a certain set of values and go work at a company that has a values clash. And you should know it going in. And because you end up blaming, like if you go work at a company that has different values than you do, then you start hating the company, you start hating the people. And no, it's just that company has a different set of values than you. You need to go find your match. And that's true about relationships. I mean, in the values bridge test, if your partner or your friend takes the test also and you check a box, we show you your values next to each other and how they line up or don't line up. And I can't tell you the number of times people say, okay, well, thank you for that, because we just discovered exactly the source of our problem. And now we have a language to discuss it. Their top value is eudaimonia, and that's my 14th value. And we can now have a conversation about whether we both slide to the center or whether we respect each other's places on that continuum. So, our values exist for us, but they exist in our organizations and our relationships.
Our relationships. Yeah. Let's talk about strengths. Let's talk about aptitudes.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think where I want to go with this. Why do strengths in your progression come after values? Tell me about why that's important.
Values are very interesting, and people kind of want to go there first. I could switch them. I could swap that order. It's
You could.
one of the technical reasons I did it is that we do a 360 feedback test as part of the aptitude section, which takes 5 weeks. And so there's a certain structural reasons why I take on aptitude second. They're of equal importance. So it's not one or the other. I would never say one is more important than the other. It's just, one had to go first. Everyone loves the idea of values, and there's that test.
Well, if you're a member of the audience and you're listening and you can't come take your class, or you can't do,
you can look. The book is there. You can do every single exercise is in the book, and we have a workbook which my students use. So you can do a facsimile of this class. The workbook is like 87 pages. If you want to take this class, you can. But go ahead.
I was going to say, one of your points is that we're not so great at assessing our own strengths.
we think we're, oh my God. No, not at all. People don't know their aptitudes. They have your parents have told you your aptitudes, because they want them to be your aptitudes. Like the number of students I get who have been told they're going to go into engineering because parents need an engineer and think that's what they should be doing, who are just absolutely, one of the first things I do when I teach aptitudes is I ask everybody to take out a piece of paper and a pen. And then I say, go ahead and sign your name with your non-dominant hand. Go ahead. And everybody goes, oh, this is horrible. Oh my God, look at that. And then I say, okay, switch the pen into your dominant hand. Now sign your name. And everybody bursts into laughter. And I said, that's right. Okay. Aptitudes are the dominant hand of your brain. And you could, if you work against your aptitudes and spend your life doing stuff that you're not wired to do aptitudinally, you would eventually get slightly better at it, and you could work and work and work. But if you spent your whole life doing work that is aligned with your actual cognitive aptitudes, your dominant hands of your brain, it's just going to be easier. And it's probably going to be more pleasurable and more enjoyable. Okay. So I could have become an engineer. Why? Because I've got general intelligence, and I could have gone to engineering school and slogged through, but I'm better at other stuff. Okay. Let the engineers be engineers. But if I had grown up in a traditional family, like many of my students have, and their parents say to them, you're going to school to become an engineer because that's what families, a first generation family do, then, I would be sort of an adequate engineer and suffering all the way through. Whereas instead, I was able to go play in the field of my aptitudes, which are stuff that is related to writing and verbal stuff and research. So anyway,
oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm going to say so we've all, my listeners are very sophisticated, and they've all taken a million tests. They've taken StrengthsFinder, and they've taken Enneagram, and they've taken all the strengths. I haven't taken your test. I'm going to when we hang up, because
I use those tests.
Your approach?
Okay, I use those tests, and I like them very much, and I think they're all great data. Okay, I invented 2 tests because I think there's 2 gigantic pieces of data that are critical about our aptitudes that we don't get from any other test. So I invented them at the Becoming You labs at NYU, and one of our very important aptitudes is our personality. Some people are great at jobs because of their personalities, and some people are terrible at their jobs because of their personalities. But the very unfortunate fact of life is that our personalities are not necessarily what we say they are. Our personalities are how the world experiences us. So we can say, I'm kind, I'm generous, I'm loyal, I'm a good listener. And maybe we are, but maybe we're not. And what we need to find out about our aptitudes to understand our true strengths is how the world experiences us. And sometimes by the time we're 40 or 50, the world eventually tells us how it's experiencing us by hard lessons. And usually in companies, you can find out how the world is experiencing you by taking long, expensive 360 feedback tests. And so I invented a do-it-yourself at-home pregnancy test of finding out how the world experiences you, which costs as much as a cup of coffee. It takes 5 minutes. You can send it to 40 people or less. You have to have at least 10 people, and you can find out how the world experiences you. That's number one. Number two, people don't know whether they should be individual contributors or leaders. And the world tells you from when you're a little kid, you should be a leader. Leaders, good. I mean, that's just the message we get. Leadership is a virtue. And the facts are that some people should not be leaders, are not happy being leaders, and are crappy leaders. And so I created a test it's free on my website, Career Traits Compass, and it gives you a score about whether you are wired to be an individual contributor or a leader. And this is a revelation for many of my students. They're taking it in their 20s. They're MBAs. They've been force-fed a line that everybody should be a leader. And it's such a relief to them when they get their score back and it says, you are an integral contributor. And they say, well, how do I break this to my parents? And I said, I don't care. Just break it to them, because you will suffer as a leader.
God.
You will suffer as a leader, and you're not meant to be one. And there's some ways to improve your leadership capacity. And there's ways to do it. And I have a lot of literature on how to do it. I teach a whole class on how to do it if you want to do it. Otherwise, You can just say, I'm at peace with being an individual contributor. Leave me alone, and go find work that matches that aptitude. Okay. So I love all the
use the 5 personality traits? Like how do you draw?
So I actually, the Career Traits Compass is based on 4 bundles of personality traits. And they are the following. I mean, there's a lot of good tests out there, but I like mine on this one. The bundles of traits I use, the first one is called, they go along with the coordinates of a compass. The first is nerve, and that is a measure of your stamina, your edge, that's your ability to make decisions, and your radical candor, your ability to say hard things from a place of love. Okay, so that's nerve. The second bundle is elasticity, and that's your comfort with adaptability and change, and the number and quality of your irregular relationships. Those are relationships that are not with people outside of your comfort zone. Leaders have to have a lot of relationships with people who are not like them, and so it measures that. The next coordinate is what I call soundness. That's resilience, accountability, and self-awareness, which are all very important for leaders in ambiguous situations. And then the final coordinate is what I call wonderment, which is 2 things. One is curiosity, which you can do nothing about because that's a gene. But the other is currency, which is your propensity to stay up to date on current events in your industry, trends, people, movements, geopolitics, and so forth. And it measures every one of these traits, and it gives you a composite score.
Interesting. What I love is I don't hear introversion and extroversion or any of the other.
And I think there can be spectacular leaders who are introverts. I think introversion and extroversion are captured. Like extroversion is generally captured by how many irregular relationships you have. Extroverts take to those a little bit more easily, but I think that it doesn't measure that.
What's the midlife answer to all this? I mean, I love that students are getting these opportunities. I certainly never had an opportunity to do anything. My life probably would have been so much easier.
Yeah, so understand that by the numbers, most of my students are midlife, because I teach executive MBAs who are in their 40s and 50s. And in my workshops that are open enrollment, the vast preponderance of people are over 40. So, I mean, my students at NYU are obviously in their 20s and 30s, but I would say when you take all the thousands of people I've taught Becoming You to at this point, it's the oldest person I've taught Becoming You to is 78 years old. So, the midlife answer is no different than the early life answer. I mean, there's no difference. The process is the process.
But the emotions are, I mean, obviously younger people have strong emotions. Just speaking personally as someone in midlife who's struggling with did I make the right choices based on who I am? As I get deeper into this work around neurodivergence and around our different brains, it's really made me wonder that same question, of did I listen to too many people? who are
Yeah.
telling me
Oh,
what I should be, which
absolutely.
I think most of
Absolutely.
us
Of
do.
course we do. Of course we do. Of course we do. Of course we do. I mean, that is part of human nature is we doubt ourselves. So we just take, we listen to everybody and then we end up not hearing our own voice.
My last question, how did you start hearing your own voice?
Well, it's a long story. I mean, I think I always heard my own voice. I was personality wise, I've been an introspective person and I definitely had a strong sense of self from when I was little. And one of the reasons was I was different from my family. And so I wasn't swept up into their values because I very early on had a sense of apartness from them. And so I almost was having a conversation with myself from as a little girl, thinking, why do I feel so different from my own family? And so I was having that conversation. And then I went to school and I read a lot of literature, which allowed me to ask the really big questions about life and apply them to myself.
Literature is
Um,
an art, not psychological, not the
Yeah, no,
literature.
no. I mean, like literally, like the moviegoer, by just literature. Okay, Dostoevsky kind of literature. Then
Art.
I studied art, and art is a way to really help you think about yourself and your feelings. So I think I came to it naturally. That's probably why I ended up in this work. But then life takes over, and I became a mother and a wife and an employee, and there were a lot of, I used to say, I always say there was a lot of shareholders in Suzy Incorporated. I mean, I had to dodge and weave my life around other people. And I will say it was only when my children were grown and out of the house and parents themselves, and when I lost my husband and became a widow, and really found myself completely the main shareholder in Suzy Incorporated, that I was
Mm.
able to hear my own voice the most loudly. So it was a journey like it is for everybody. And sometimes I still say, well, what do I really want here? And I have to stop myself. And I'm like, this is my work. And even I have to say, wait, am I making this decision for my dogs? That's the number one reason I make decisions that are not my own these days. But it's like, I think it's the life, it's the work of our life. It's a constant exercise in courage to hear our own voice.
When I love a lot of stakeholders, shareholders, I have so many shareholders
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
How do we carve out that little piece? Is there
We,
is
we
there
know
a,
our values.
we know
The
our values.
first step is to know your values and talk about them. That's the Declaration of Independence. That's the beginning of the conversation with the people around you. Instead of reacting to them in kind of default mode, you say, hey, let me talk to you about me for a second here. Maybe we're going to come to a compromise solution, but I am this. I have high agency. I value luminance. I this, I that. Now let's talk. Let's hear about your values. But you've got to have your Declaration of Independence somewhere in there, and that starts with saying starts with knowing who you are. It's hard. I'm not going to
It's
lie.
so
That's hard stuff.
hard.
I mean, I get what I'm saying is very hard, but this is what I do day in and day out, and I see people do it. And we just got an email. The whole office was just like shouting it back and forth to each other. We just got an email from somebody who's used the tools and done Becoming You, and I forget the exact word she used. So I could find it, but she just said, "You've changed my life. A life-changing experience," is what she said. We get it. What we're doing is very hard. Your life is not changed easily. It's not.
No. I'm grateful for your work. I actually am going to spend time tomorrow going through all your tools
Oh,
and
goody. I'd love
and
that.
hopefully incorporate them into my work because I want people to have this
I'd
gift.
love
So
that. We have a big, we have many therapists who use the values bridge in their practices, so much so that we actually certify therapists in it because they want to know how to use these tools more, in their detail. So, I mean, this is, I think, more and more, especially values bridge, becoming a piece of it. So I'd love that. And if you do, let me know.
I will. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right.